Hi, I'm Alan Hedblum. Welcome to our show, a place to feel like you belong. During our conversation, you'll notice words and phrases appearing at the bottom of the screen. After our dialogue, stay tuned for What'd You Say? A follow-up segment where we explain some of the difficult slang and cultural concepts that you heard. A complete list will be given on our website for the conversation with today's date. For now, let's welcome today's guest. I'd like to welcome to our studio today Carlos Pava. Carlos is the Vice President and COO of Voices for Health in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Carlos, welcome to Feel Like You Belong.
Thank you, Alan. I'm happy to be here.
So you grew up in Colombia, and as a young man, you decided to come to West Michigan. How does a person decide to come thousands of miles here?
Well, I got to a point in my life that I wanted a change, and I was very interested in learning the language. I did not speak any English, and there was an advisor for international students over there. So I went and visited this guy, and he had a few options, a few ideas of initially I wanted to go to London, but it was cost prohibitive. It was really, really expensive to do that, and we probably didn't have the resources for that at the time. So then the next thing was, was Big Rapids, Michigan. Ferris State University has an English as a second language program. I understand it is still current, and they still offer those services over there. And somehow this advisor had an agreement with this organization. And I guess the key two words to get to Big Rapids, Michigan was I'm looking for immersion in the language, and I'm also looking for something cheap.
Well, and you get both of those at Ferris State University.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's a state school and a relatively small town, so
yes,
not very cosmopolitan, not a lot of other Spanish speakers to corrupt your English.
That was 22 years ago. So I thought that I was coming through immersion, but it turned out that maybe another 15 Colombians had the same requirements. So we were a bunch of Colombians in Big Rapids having fun and speaking a lot of Spanish. So I was there for a while, and I truly enjoyed it, and it was a very nice program. But then it became a little bit too expensive for us to continue with that. And then I came to Grand Rapids.
And attended the community college.
I went to the community college, exactly. That was going to be a little bit more affordable. And that's what I did. I met some people in that experience, and yes.
And then you went on to get your degree from Michigan State?
Yes, yes. I wasn't really much into education at the time. I mean, I didn't think that I was going to go to the university, and I was more of an entrepreneur. Even in Colombia, I had a couple of experiences doing different things and stuff. I wasn't a very bright student and pretty average, and probably with a GPS that was not enough for me to be accepted at any of the universities in Colombia. So I wasn't really looking for that. But I mean, after completing my education at the community college, and I met my wife-to-be at the moment over there, so I was influenced, and I do that, and I continue.
So then, after your degree at MSU, what was the path that got you to your eventual job at Voices for Health?
Well, when I was going to the community college, of course, I was doing all kinds of jobs to support myself and working all over the place. But one of those jobs was working as an interpreter. I met some people that introduced me to an organization that gave me the opportunity to start had my first experience as an interpreter. So I was being trained to go to the court and doing some interpreting over there, and eventually I did that for a long time. In addition to that, I started also going in the medical field. So all the time while I was going to school, besides all the other jobs that I was doing, whether it's delivering pizzas or everything that we do when we have to go to school, exactly. Right. I was also an interpreter all the time, and I was very fascinated by that. I really liked it. Yes, I learned to really enjoy that job and doing that.
So then how did you get to Voices for Health? Well,
when I graduated at the university, I came and I was accepted to help direct one of the programs from a local organization of their interpretation program. Mm-hmm. And I worked with this organization for a while. And then while doing that, I met my business partner, who had started her own small business. And I really enjoyed, I really liked the approach that she was taking to this business. I mean, she was a healthcare provider herself, so she wanted to concentrate mainly on the medical. And that was something that I had already come to a realization that that's what I like it, what I enjoyed it the most, more than other areas of the field. I wanted to go in the medical too. Also, in addition to my education in business administration, I also had a degree in psychology. Mm-hmm. And I actually wanted to go into industrial psychology. I have a lot of ideas of what I wanted to do, but anyways. So,
but you and Michelle really bring two very discrete skill sets to your current business.
Exactly.
So you've got the language and translation
and
thing
the business,
going, interpretation business.
And she does a lot of also the business, but also all the health background. I mean, she was a community nurse and stuff, so she knew what we needed to be successful in the business, and she had a great business plan, and it was something that was very attractive to me. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't think about it twice, and that was about 16 years ago. Mm-hmm.
So how does a patient encounter your organization? So I'm a second language speaker. Mm-hmm. I come to the hospital. How do I interact with your services?
That's a good question. That's a good question because the way they do it is that, I mean, we provide the service through healthcare organizations, because it's actually the service that we provide, one of the services that we provide, interpretation in the medical setting, is actually mandated by law for most medical organizations. Any organization that receives any funding, whether it's directly or indirectly, is required to offer language accommodation to these patients, and on the request of the patient, not the provider. And I think that's important to understand, that it is on the request of the patient. If the patient feels that they need an interpreter, the organization is required by law to offer that service. So that's when they call us, and we dispatch interpreters to facilitate communication between the providers and the patients. And so that's one of the ways we
do. Some people see your service as a kind of a frill, like either I can imagine an administrator looking at the budget saying, oh, this is just something extra we don't need to do, or some people from the outside saying this is making our healthcare system too expensive. What would you say to either of those people? I'm sure you've had to answer that question before.
Yes. I mean, from the legal point of view, it is mandated by law. Okay. And it's something that they need to account as part of their budget, because it's cost that cannot be passed along to anybody. Now, there are some initiatives in different places to try to do that in the near future, but here in Michigan, it is an expense that the organization should budget for. But other than the expense, I mean, there are many motivations that they will have to be able to offer this service. I mean, they want the patients to be satisfied with the service they provide. We have great organizations that are truly committed to decreasing disparities, to welcoming immigrants into the community, to make sure that the language doesn't become a barrier between their organization and their patients. So fortunately, especially here in West Michigan, I've seen great, a good disposition to be able to provide the service. I mean,
and I would think for anyone who doesn't speak English as a first language, it would be really comforting to have this explanation at a time when, you know, there's some grave concerns about your health. I mean, it's a very personal issue. To have that comfort.
That's important because, especially here in West Michigan, there is a big commitment from most organizations to provide this service the way they're supposed to, and people know that. So one of the good outcomes of this is that the patients do not wait until the very last minute to access the healthcare system. So they are more involved in their preventative care. They are more involved in trying to find out what is happening before sometimes it's too late. I've noticed that and contrast that with other communities where people don't know that the service is being provided, where the service is not being provided the way it's supposed to be provided. And because of that, the patients are hesitant to access the healthcare system.
And then the problem builds up, and then you end up treating acute care.
And then they come into the facility through the emergency room, which we all know that it's a lot more expensive, it's a lot more complicated, and sometimes it is too late.
Carlos, let me ask you, are there HIPAA concerns?
Oh yes, of course, yes. And HIPAA is one of the laws that regulate also language accommodation.
Okay.
One of the things that HIPAA says is that it is not okay to ask a patient to bring their own interpreter or to bring a family member or a friend to interpret for them, because that is a HIPAA violation. So HIPAA...
and in fact, the family member may not be qualified to talk about these technical procedures, because your interpreters are trained.
They are trained, they have been assessed, they have gone through the training, not just assessing their skills, their ability to interpret, but also they have been trained and on things that go beyond just the language skill, interpreting skills, knowing their codes of ethics, the standards of practice, everything that they need to know. So it makes a huge difference. I would rather have a trained professional interpreter to facilitate communication as I am interacting with my patient, that a friend or a family member that might be not as transparent in terms of the communication, but also is someone that is affected by the information that is being
is not able to be logical and reasonable because they have an emotional investment as well.
Exactly.
Tell me about the educational component of Voices for Health.
Yes, we just recently introduced a new program that we call Voices Academy.
Okay.
And this is an online resource for medical interpreters to access continuing education so that they can advance their skills and knowledge of the profession. And so it's a subscription-based website where they will go and they will sign up and they have access to these modules of training to advance
So how many interpreters do you work with?
Right now we have somewhere around 200 contractors that work with us.
So that's a big family of people that you're actually supporting. So it makes sense to them to work with you because you're helping their own professionalism.
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. And
that's awesome. That's awesome. I know if we had more time, I'd love to talk more about the studio you have in California and the materials, the videos you're creating, but our time is drawing to a close. To finish with, I'd like to ask you, what advice would you have for young entrepreneurs, especially coming to this country from elsewhere?
Good question. Well, when you are an entrepreneur, you have a small business like ours. I mean, there is a tendency to want to do everything yourself.
Okay.
And sometimes the problem with that is that we're not necessarily good at everything. So you have to learn to delegate, and you have to recognize that you have a skill, and you need to concentrate on that skill. And then, if possible, of course, sometimes the resources don't allow that, but you can't be the attorney, and you cannot be the accountant yourself, and you cannot do the human resources yourself. I mean, so because what happens with that is that then the quality of life decreases, because you are so involved in trying to do everything that then you stop paying attention to other things in life, like family, like friends, like enjoying what you do, because you are trying to do everything
and you
yourself.
get away from your core expertise.
Exactly.
By trying to do that as well.
So, of course, it's understandable that we have to do a little bit of that at the beginning, but we need to concentrate on really doing the best we can, so we can advance to a point where you can start delegating, and you can yes.
Makes good sense. And I really want to encourage our viewers to visit your website, because you're doing really interesting things and really a valuable service, because we all need some help when we're trying to communicate, especially around such important issues as our health and our vulnerability at these times. So, Carlos, I want to thank you so much for stopping by and sharing your story with us. You bet. And for our viewers, if you'll stay tuned, we'll be back in just a moment with our follow-up segment called What'd You Say? During our conversation, Carlos talked about the interpreters who work for his company. Now, people often confuse interpreters with translators. Interpreters work with the spoken word, for example, between patients and doctors. Translators, on the other hand, work with written texts, usually alone in their offices. At one point, I asked Carlos about HIPAA laws. These are federal laws concerning patient information and patient privacy. A link to the details on HIPAA laws will be provided on the What'd You Say page of our website, along with other unfamiliar words and phrases from our conversation with Carlos. I can always tell when someone is new to the Great Lakes state. In the first few minutes of conversation, it usually comes out how they just moved to Michigan. As a good ambassador of the mitten-shaped peninsula, I then have to correct them. It's pronounced Michigan. I say this sometimes adding that the spelling came from the early French trappers and explorers who beat the British to the upper Midwest. It's hard to stop a good teacher ambassador once he gets started with these explanations. But it should come to no surprise to students of English that the spelling system of this language is a nightmare. Almost half of our words come from German, some Germanic languages, for example, Old Saxon, and nearly another half of them come from Latin via Old French. Add to that a sprinkling of Arabic, Spanish, Greek, and other languages, and it's clear that our vocabulary and the system used to spell it is one huge mishmash of letters and letter clusters and even silent letters. There is good news, however. We have a basic rule. Most of the time, this CH cluster in English is pronounced ch, as in child or lunch. Here are some common place names or people names which most English speakers know. Chelsea, Massachusetts, Charleston, Chattanooga, Richmond, and I'll give you more examples on our website. If your native language is Spanish, then you already know the correct pronunciation of these CH words. Now, of course, you're waiting to say, come on, Alan, there are exceptions, and yes, in the question today of the cluster CH, as we see in Michigan, students who have studied French or Portuguese know that these two letters represent the sound sh, like in the cluster SH as in she. So here are some common CH place names or people names with the sh pronunciation. Chicago, Michigan, Cheyenne, Charlotte, Michelle, Cheryl, Michelin, Chevron, Chanel, Chevrolet, Cher, and more examples
again, on our website. A second exception, there's another way to pronounce CH, and that is with a K sound. These words often come to English from Greek or Italian, words like chronicle, chemistry, stomach, echo, Christmas, headache, Chrysler, chrome, and more examples go to our website. A third small exception, there's a group of words with a CH spelling that come to us from Hebrew. Now these words are pronounced with this sound ch, with this kind of friction noise coming from the back of your mouth. It's similar to the ch sound in Bach if you speak German. But of course, because most English speakers can't pronounce this ch sound, they just kind of substitute an H sound, a h sound. So here are a few of the Hebrew examples. Chutzpah, challah, Hanukkah. So for any of you newcomers to my state, here's a tip for you. Michigan sounds like fishigan or wishigan. So now, repeat after me. Oh, how I wish again I were in Michigan, learning to fish again. Happy practicing, everybody.
As we've discussed on previous shows, one difficult aspect of learning a second language is adapting to humor that involves plays on words. They are also called puns. The appropriate way to receive a pun when it is told is to pretend you didn't think it was funny. You might stare at the pun teller or even let out a groan. Aww. We don't want to give punsters credit for their clever wordplay, but usually we end up smiling or even laughing. Here's a clever wordplay that most Americans would chuckle over. The question to you is, do you think this is funny? Two antennas meet on a rooftop, fall in love, and get married. Now, the wedding ceremony wasn't much, but the reception was excellent. Did you laugh? This joke involves one word having two different meanings. If you didn't get the joke, check out our What's So Funny webpage for the explanation.